Hello everybody and thank you for joining me. This is Sierra from Sierra T Designs, and today I have these two really fun slimline cards to share with you. So let's jump right in. As always, I like to cut down my cardstock first, and this is the base of my slimline card. I have a full piece of cardstock here and that I'm going to cut 4 inches off of to give me a 7-inch by 8.5 inch panel. And then I'm also going to cut down my panel, which is where I'm going to ink blend. And it is a piece of Hammermill cardstock, and I cut it down to be 1/8 of an inch smaller than my card base. And I kind of just eyeball this measurement. You'll see me check it here after I've scored the cardstock, but I kind of just guess a little bit. And then here I'm just going to score my base at 3.5 inches. So I will have a 3.5 by 8.5 inch card base. I kind of do both sides just to break the fibers in the cardstock. It's easier to fold, at least I find that it is. So I do both sides because I usually use a pretty heavyweight base, and I find that this makes it just easier for me to not have the cardstock crack in my bases as I fold them. So here I'm going to use, I have 3 colors of oxide inks. I have Tumbled Glass, Pumice Stone, and Shaded Lilac, and I'm kind of just going to put them randomly on the background. My original idea for this card was a bit different than where I ended up, but I think it still turned out really stunning. I didn't originally plan to do 2 cards. I planned to do one with like spinners, but I didn't like how the thread I didn't like how it went through the snowflakes, because the snowflakes have so many holes in them that you could see it in a couple of places, and I didn't really like that look. So I ended up changing my mind halfway through this card. But yeah, so I'm just going to blend the 3 colors in the background. The Tumbled Glass takes me a little while because it's getting a bit dry. It's one of my favorite colors, and so I really need to re-ink it, but I don't have re-inkers for most of my colors yet, so that's something I'm going to have to invest in now. But I just wanted to use it because it's one of my favorite color palettes. And I really knew that I wanted to do silver snowflakes, so I chose like a really light blue, a really light purple, and then kind of a gray just to tie it together because I wanted 3 colors. So that's kind of what I was thinking here. You could definitely change this up and do any blend. I mean, you can't really go wrong with glitter cardstock at any point. And most inks look really pretty together. But I did know that I was going to cut circles into this background, so I didn't really worry about how perfectly it was blended or anything like that. I just kind of blended back and forth throughout the colors, made sure that there was no areas that looked splotchy, and otherwise just added some color onto the background and kind of called it a day. So they're not really perfectly blended, but I think it turned out really pretty. I like these colors together, so I think once the background kind of is in the background, it looks really pretty. So I am going to splash on some water to start. So you're going to see here I just splashed it into my hand, and then I flicked it onto the background. And then I brought in a microfiber cloth just to lift that water before it caused too much pooling. And then I also brought in some Perfect Pearls in the color Perfect Pearl, and I'm just going to splash it onto the background. I just have it mixed up in a mini mister bottle, and I didn't want a whole bunch, so I'm kind of just flicking it on in little areas. So I generally don't use the sprayer bottle. I just find it's really neat to have it all mixed up together and really simple to use. So I tend to use it like that. You could mist it on instead though. I generally don't. And then you're going to see here, so I have several snowflakes that I've die cut out. I actually only have 2 snowflakes here that I've cut out several times. I have the Simon Says Stamp Grace and Sophie snowflake, and I'm just using little dabs of the craft tacky glue to adhere them together, because when I thought about my spinner card, I wanted the glitter cardstock to have a white background because I was worried that the glitter cardstock is a bit thinner, and I was worried that it wouldn't hold up as well while it was spinning. So I'm still thinking I'm making a spinner at this point. Obviously, you guys have seen the cards. You know that that's not where we're going, but that was my thought process here. So I have this is Concord and 9th's neutral glitter cardstock, and I pulled out a sheet of the silver, and I cut 2, because it was each side, right? So there's multiple layers, so I cut out multiple snowflakes. I think there's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think I cut out 12 snowflakes altogether. And just 2 of the, I believe it's the Sophie is the bigger one, and then the Grace is the smaller one. So, and then I'm just putting them all together. You'll see here if I think that I get too much glue on the back, or on one of my snowflakes, I'll actually pounce it off onto my glass mat. This is one reason the glass mat is amazing when you're using anything, glue, pastes, anything like that, because it comes off of the glass mat so easily. So you'll see me, like, I'll pounce the snowflake off on the glass mat if I feel like I've gotten too much glue on it. Just remove some before I actually glue it to the snowflake, or the glitter snowflake, just so that I don't have it oozing out everywhere. You can on this. It's not going anywhere. It's not like it's going to ruin your project, but I just chose not to do that. So I brought in 2 different sizes of circle die. This is from a nested circle dies set. I used the larger die in the center, and then I have a smaller die that I used on the sides there, and I used it to go just off of the cardstock. And then I have some purple tape that I'm very gently lifting off of my background so that it doesn't rip up my colored cardstock. So this is the piece that I thought I would use, and I thought that I would then use those circle dies and line them up on my card base as well so that it could spin. But in the end, I chose not to do this, because you can see all the little details in the snowflake, and you could see the string through it. Even though it's supposed to be invisible string, you could still see it. And I didn't like how that looked. So in the end, I opted to I made a second base the exact same way I made the first base. And then I just kind of did 2 different cards with this one blended background in the snowflakes that I was cutting originally for the spinner card. So it really worked out. So then I brought in my Nuvo Deluxe glue, simply because I find my tacky glue, the end likes to clog up on me sometimes, and I'm too, like, I want to get it made. Like, I'm just so excited to see the final product. So I kind of just end up going back to my Nuvo Deluxe glue usually. But I like the finer tip on the Simon Says Stamp tacky glue. So I kind of jump between glues a lot. And then I'm just sticking this one down as I had imagined it. And then I'm going to stick some of 3 of the snowflakes in it in the center of each circle. This one's kind of more straight up and down, as opposed to when I do the second card, I'm going to kind of put them off kilter. They're not going to be perfectly centered in each circle. You can kind of see it sitting there beside where I have it, and I kind of played with the idea of these not being in the circle. You could absolutely do that. It looked beautiful too, but because I was making 2 of them, I kind of ended up deciding that this one, the images, like the snowflakes, would be centered on the card in the circles, and the second one I would make go out of the circles, just to add some difference in like texture and look. I also didn't add dimension to the first one, and I'm so sorry, my camera died as I was gluing those down, but I mean, you can see how I glued them down. They're pretty much perfectly centered to the circle. And then on this one, I'm going to glue down the circles, because I cut them going off of the page, so that there was kind of that cut into the circle, so they weren't perfect circles. So I'm lining them up so that that same cut goes off of the cardstock, so it still looks like it's not perfectly centered on the cardstock. And then of course the center circle will still go in the middle of the card, and then I'm going to kind of off-center each of the snowflakes from their circle, just to add a little bit of visual interest more than anything. You could center them, it would still look beautiful. This card I think could have gone a couple of ways and it still would have looked really pretty. But I, in the end, just decided to kind of do 2 different cards with the exact same materials pretty much, right? Like, I didn't do a lot of work for the second card, I just used what I had got out of the first card. So I think that it turned out quite pretty. I am also going to add only a little bit of glue to the center of my snowflakes, and then glue it down and push really hard on the center. And then I'm going to lift up as it dries. I'm going to lift up the outsides of the snowflake to add dimension to this card. So on the first card, it's very flat. There's very little dimension until I bring in the sentiment. But on the second card, the one I'm making right now, I really wanted more visual texture in it, so I end up lifting up the legs of the snowflake, or pieces of the snowflake that stand out, and so that adds a bit more dimension to the card. And I'm going to do the same thing with the center snowflake, although it's going to be just the outside pieces. I did glue down a majority of the center of that snowflake, because I wanted it to hold on, because it's so delicate, and it has so many filigreed pieces or delicate pieces in the center that I was worried it wouldn't stay. So I'm only going to lift up the pieces that are kind of on the very outside of that snowflake. But I think it looks quite pretty. And then I did stamp out the same sentiment. This is the same sentiment. And then I brought in some Darice foam strips that I'm going to back them, just the one with. And I'm going to stick those down on top of the card there. Where'd the sentiment come from? I'm trying to remember what stamp set the sentiment came from. I'm not even sure, I'll be honest with you. I'll have it linked and listed down below though, so I've just forgot off the top of my head which stamp set that's from. But it will, everything I always use is always linked and listed down below, so you guys can always check it out. And if you have any questions, please ask me. I'm more than happy to talk to you or answer any questions you have, or any help that I can give. Just let me know. So I stuck that one down in the center of the big snowflake, and I lifted it up with that little bit of dimension because that card has no added dimension to it. And then I'm going to stick the second one down just above the large circle. I didn't want to put it on top of the snowflake because I've lifted up pieces of the snowflake, so I opted not to do that on that one, whereas on the other one it's quite flat, so the only dimension in it is actually the sentiment. So that's just kind of how I went. Again, there's so many ways you could do this that would just look stunning. And I brought in a couple of gems and just stuck them down, and stuck them down onto the card base. So those are the cards I have for you guys this week. I hope you enjoyed them. Leave me a comment, leave me a like, let me know what you think. I'd love to know. And please consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do a new video every Monday, and I have a couple of new things coming in the works here that I hope I'm going to get in play really quick here. So thank you guys so much for stopping by and all the love and all the likes and all the comments. I really appreciate them. I will see you guys again soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.